DEI is all about meritocracy and managing the racism that undermines meritocracy. It's not about choosing a race that is worse at something just for the sake of it. No one's arguing that. No one's arguing that we should have less competent pilots, less competent doctors, less competent lawyers. That would be a stupid argument, and that's never been made. So Piers Morgan has this new book called Woke is Dead, and to promote it, he invited the wokest people he could find and debated them on Uncensored. Now, most of these interactions are actually pretty boring on this episode, because the term wokeness and DEI have been cast into obscurity. Their definitions are meaningless. No one can really tell what they mean. So when you're debating whether DEI or wokeness is good, it's really good to agree on what those terms even mean to begin with. But this DEI exchange is actually pretty interesting. And I feel like I can explain some of the benefits of DEI programs because they're never represented that well. Here's the clip.
And on DEI, Bonnie, my issue with DEI is that, like a lot of things, it sounds okay in principle. But the way it was executed and why it's been reversed now by most companies is because what it ended up doing was promoting mediocrity over meritocracy. That actually, I believe everyone should get the same opportunity, right? That we should all agree on. But once that ladder starts up at any business or industry, then meritocracy should be dominant. You should be promoted based on your abilities, not on your skin color or your gender.
You're absolutely right.
Or anything. Do you agree with that?
I do, but this is the historical problem. We're in a moment where, and again, to say this from my own background and my age and where I grew up, there is a long, long history of, not you particularly, but men like you being able to get jobs, being able to be promoted.
Sure.
So that history is being corrected very recently in historical record.
Yeah.
So you get things like that as a way to sort of jumpstart it. I agree. I do not have an issue with you about this, but I'm saying that the reason it happens is because we've got to accelerate. We've got to accelerate equality. We must. If we don't accelerate equality, Piers, we're losing genius.
But
we could be losing genius.
No, I don't disagree. But here's the point I would make. I don't think it helps the cause of getting to genuine equality if you promote mediocrity above people's ability. And people who have more ability are suppressed in the process.
Well,
that actually just creates antagonism and resentment.
Just to establish kind of a common first principle, I think we should all consider first if colorblindness is always the answer, and the easiest way to do that is imagine apartheid South Africa, a system that is deliberately designed to literally funnel wealth to a small minority of people, white people namely, and then that system ends. White people own all the land, all the businesses. What do? The white people are culturally more likely to hire other white people. Do you just allow that system to perpetuate itself? Or do you move in the direction of imposing a movement that moves towards actual color blindness by seeing color? That's what DEI is, in my opinion, and I'll get to meritocracy in a second. Do you do that system in order to actually focus on meritocracy? When you start in that area of apartheid South Africa, you are not in a meritocracy. You are actually suppressing genius, as she said, right? The smartest people are probably born in Sudan or Gaza, where they don't get a chance to actually express their intelligence because they didn't win the genetic lottery, like I did, and get born in the Western Hemisphere. So that's basically the logic there. Meritocracy is often misrepresented as a slope, as a continuous movement, along the X and Y axis. That's not how it works for most jobs. Either unless you're an entrepreneur, in which case you're not getting hired. Either you can do the job or you cannot do the job. And once you have two people who can both do the job, that's how meritocracy is just like a staircase, right? Two people who can both do the job, one of them is overrepresented at the firm relative to the population representation in that area, and the other one is underrepresented. Don't you think it would be moral and a movement towards actual colorblindness to ensure you are actively managing the diversity of your workplace in order to prevent any kind of unconscious accumulation of a 100% white workplace? Now, there are some DEI programs that I would disagree with. DEI programs that actually reinforce what Piers Morgan kind of mentioned there, resentment, like funneling people into presentations or talks, telling them that they are at fault for a vast array of suffering in society, or racism, or whatever, or that they're being racist in some kind of malicious way by not like reading Black nationalist literatures of the civil rights movement. Like that's not productive, really. And I think some corporate DEI programs, like the corporate DEI programs that Mark Cuban, for example, stands for, emphasizes reaching out to a broad array of people so that they can have a broad array of applicants, so that they can find the most meritable person there. So DEI is all about meritocracy and managing the racism that undermines meritocracy. It's not about it's not necessarily about choosing a race that is worse at something just for the sake of it. No one's arguing that. No one's arguing that we should have less competent pilots, less competent doctors, less competent lawyers. That would be a stupid argument, and that's never been made. If we are truly a colorblind, non-racist society, then a perfect DEI program would be meaningless, because that is the end goal. But oftentimes the status quo, like coming off of a system like Jim Crow or South Africa, is not to say yesterday we were extremely color based, built a system based on color, and now since this system is abolished, we're colorblind. We don't see color anymore. It's like, yeah, for a minority of the population, or a majority in some cases, that benefited from that non-color blindness, it's easy to say we don't see color anymore. But for the other vast majority of people, they can't help but see color, because that's how their lives have been built. And color has inextricably exacted itself on their lives. So that's the usage of DEI program. And Piers Morgan is not very, he's not very good faith in how he represents wokeness. Because I think that's the extent of wokeness, or when it is good. Wokeness can include, civil rights as a base layer, obviously. I think that's what it means. And then as a secondary layer, you can include certain measures to speed up society's movement towards an idealistic culture. So there's a cultural component, and that intertwines itself economically, as we just said. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. Piers Morgan is just like cherry picking the most extreme, Black nationalist authors or whatever that were being, thrown around when wokeness was actually arguably getting out of hand. Peak COVID, peak BLM riots. That is not a representation of what the word means, in my opinion. You'd have to go to the very outer circles of far left extremists. I can't even name one. Like, I don't even think Hassan is that woke. And certainly nobody at the middle left outlets like TYT is that woke. If anything, they're probably less woke than I am. But I want to know what Piers' definition of woke is, because he has a bad habit of arguing about stuff without deciding on definitions first. And to be fair, that's what most people do. And it gets you nowhere. He also talks about reparations here. Reparations are interesting because it's typically a function of the judicial branch, right? Reparations are a very everyday thing. Like when we have military camps that are poisoned, that the water's poison and people get cancer from it. What's that Camp Lagoon? I don't know. We pay out reparations for that because the government oversaw something that exacted damages upon people, and those damages were demonstrable. So you could make the same argument here. You could say the government oversaw a system and that exacted damages on a certain group of people, and if they can prove that they had a parent or grandparent that lived in that system, and of course it affected their wealth, we can see that very obviously in the statistics, then they could get some kind of reparation. Now, the reparation would not at all fix the disparity. There are cultural aspects, of course, and I don't know why some people on the left won't say that. Like, there are cultural differences between races that obviously affect wealth. It's why we see that there's such a big divide between races. I mean, there's no other way to explain it, really. You can't come up with the system in America that has propelled Asians so far ahead, or Indians or Jews. I don't know that system, but somehow you can also at the same time point to a system that you think has suppressed black people to that extent. And that system would have to be a modern system, of course. I'm talking about past systems where the government takes responsibility for and pays out damages for what it oversaw and what it administered in a lot of cases. And that's no different than any other judicial payout. And it's not meant to fix the racial wealth gap. If you're talking about wealth gaps, you implement programs to better people's quality of life, namely poor people. I don't really care about the wealth gap itself. But when you're talking about this specific racial component, you are just acknowledging a wrongdoing and paying out damages for a program that demonstrably hurt a group of people. But that's it. I might read his book. It doesn't sound very interesting, but hopefully there's like a free PDF I can find.